Well, thanks all for coming. I'm Jason Stevenson. I'm the communications manager here at the ACLU of Utah. And this is actually my first presentation like this. Normally Marina Lowe or Anna Thomas does these presentations. But Anna actually went to Voices for Utah Children, and Marina had to be unexpectedly out of the state. So I get to do it, which meant I got to update the whole presentation over the past 2 days with the new legislature website, because it actually did change a couple weeks ago. They totally revamped the website. Changed it a little bit here and there. I think a lot of people said it was improved, but we'll have to see how it works for the upcoming legislative session. I appreciate Maria Del Mar being here and helping. Maria Del Mar, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everybody, I am Maria Del Mar Gonzalez. Some of you know me. My first name is Maria Del Mar. It is not Maria. And I am the Community Outreach Fellow for the ACLU of Utah. So you have two of the newbies for the team here meeting you tonight. Welcome.
Okay, so we'll just go ahead and get started, and apologize that we're a little late. We had some technical glitches here, and actually the internet is coming in fits and starts, so hopefully it will stay flowing for the rest of the presentation. But first of all, I'd like to know how you guys found out about the event. How many of you in the room here found out about it via Facebook? Is that most of the way? Anybody get an email from the ACLU about it as well? A couple of you. And those of you that are watching online, just type in the comment section, how you found out about it as well. We like to keep track about how people, figure out what we're doing and what's going on. We do have another community lobbying event coming up on the 31st of January, and I'll talk about that at the very end, but that'll be at the Salt Lake City Public Library, the main library, and that'll be much more like how you, interact with legislators, how you get them to listen to you, that kind of one-on-one interpersonal skills. This is more about how to use the website that the legislature has put together. So let's go ahead and get started. So the website for the legislature is le.utah.gov, or as I like to say, leutah.gov, the French version. And it is a new website. We just had it updated in the past couple of weeks. Very similar to the old one, but there's some tweaks and I think some improvements as well. So those of you following along at home, or those that are able to get even a spurt of internet in this room, try to follow along. You can actually do it on your mobile phone as well. The website works really well on your mobile phone, so if you're willing to pull that out and work on that, it's actually the way a lot of citizen lobbyists work up at the Hill. Because you can move around more easily, you can sit in a committee hearing, you can text a legislator in the middle of a hearing without pulling out a clunky laptop. So that actually is something that the website excels at. So go to le.utah.gov and welcome to Cyber Lobbying 101. This is the homepage, the new homepage for the legislature's website. Now, what we're going to do is mostly focus on a couple of boxes and a couple of menus on this site. And actually, those three white boxes in the middle, the ones that say Resources, Calendar, and My Legislators, those are probably the most important tools that we're going to use. And I've indicated them by the red arrow. And there's a couple of other menus and top pull-down menus that we'll use as well. But we're actually going to start with those three white boxes. But another thing I wanted to point out was in the upper left corner, you'll see where the green arrow is, it says Utah Legislature, and there's a little icon of a white dome. That is your Get to the Homepage Escape button right there. If you're ever buried in the depths of the legislature and you're reading about the personal life of some person who's an elected official and you want to get out of there, just click that button. It's in the same place on all the website pages, and it will get you back to this homepage. And we're going to use it a couple of times this evening to kind of come back to this page as we start exploring different aspects of this website. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is that we're going to click on the Find My Legislature or Legislator. And so actually what you want to do is go to where that red box is and click on the My Legislators area right there. And we're going to go and just make sure that you can find who is your legislator. I think I clicked on the wrong thing here. Let me get back to that. Because it's important to know who represents you. And for many people beginning in lobbying, this is the first thing that you're going to want to do. So let's go ahead and click on that box. And what it does is it'll bring you, actually, this is a new aspect of the webpage. It looks a little bit different. Place where you can enter a street address and your zip code. You enter that in there, and it will pop up based on really you need your address. Zip code isn't quite enough because some of the districts spread over a couple different zip codes. That will pop up who your legislators are. So what we use is an address somewhere in between Salt Lake City and Mill Creek. What you do is you type that in and then you type set. And actually one of the new aspects of the website is that it will remember where you're coming from. It will actually remember your address so that it will continually remind you who your legislators are. It actually kind of reminds you in the upper left-hand corner of the page. It will, have their contact information and it will kind of follow you around. You might have to have location settings updated in your computer or your phone, but it is a new tool or a new aspect to the website so that you don't have to consistently look it up. It will remember it for you, which, if you're worried about privacy, you might be a little concerned about, but it is something new that they have this time around. So if you click on View Map, you'll actually see some versions of where the different districts are. Usually that's not important, but let's say you've got a friend and your friend wants to know who their legislators are. Well, you can, get their address or look them up on a map and you can help them find out who represents them in the Utah House or the Utah Senate. So that can actually be a pretty good tool. So we'll put in an address and we'll press set. And here for that address, up comes a House member and a Senate member. Everybody's got one of each. And there are, 29 senators and there are 75 House members. So for a full legislature of about 104 when it's at full complement. Of course, the House districts are smaller than the Senate districts because of that. So for this address, we have Lynn Hemingway as the representative and Gene Davis as the senator. Now, this is where you can actually get to know a little bit more about your legislators by clicking on their individual faces or their names there. And when you do that, you'll actually go and be able to learn more about them and even learn their contact information. So let's click on Gene Davis. And you'll notice the website has changed a little bit. We are now on the Senate website. If you look up here, it says Utah State Senate. We're no longer in the general legislature website. We're in the Senate website. So that can be a little confusing, and sometimes you'll feel like you're in the legislature, but you're actually in the Senate or the House side. You just got to kind of pull back a little bit to get back to the main one. But in this case, the bios and the information about each of the representatives is on their own chamber website. So this is pretty helpful, though. We've got phone numbers, we've got email addresses, we've got committee listings, we've got a lot of information about who represents you, or even if you're looking up another legislator, perhaps someone who's working on a bill that you're interested in, you can get all this information about them as well. Now, I checked in with Marina Lowe yesterday about sort of the protocol for contacting legislators, and this is something we'll discuss more later in the month, but you can see here we have Gene Davis's mobile phone number. Now, how many of us would feel comfortable just kind of dialing that up or sending a text message, right? Some of us will, right? Some of us might know Senator Davis. Some of us have a lot of chutzpah and are going to do that anyway. But when I talked to Marina, she had some good advice about what to say there, so I wanted to share that with you. She said, no matter when you contact a legislator, if you are a constituent, like they represent you, put that in the subject line. Put that in the first line of the email. Say it twice. Put your address. Make sure they can't ignore the fact that you are a constituent, because they will read you and listen to you and pay a lot more attention if they know that you are a voter and someone interested in the legislative process and they represent you. So make sure that that is upfront. Subject line, address, all that kind of stuff is very important. Now, it will increase the chance that your email gets read and actually responded to as well. I mean, they get hundreds of emails, almost every day sometimes. So, but they do sit down and they try to respond to those that are their constituents. So here's the other question, though: should you send an email, or should you send a text, or should you make a phone call? When I posed this question to Marina, she said, you know what? If you know the person and they know you, and maybe you're actually in their phone, like your name would pop up in your photo, and your photo of you and your dogs and your cats or whatever is going to be in their phone, then go ahead and do that cell phone message or cell phone call. But if it's a cold call, she recommended an email, because that way your name is there. It's not just this random phone number. And you can put a little bit more text and a little bit more context in whatever request you're talking about. So she recommends emailing, especially if you don't know the person that well. Now, once you develop a relationship, she said text messages and phone calls can be very helpful. Text messages are nice because, let's say they're in a committee hearing or they're on in the floor debate, they can actually read that without having to answer the phone and kind of interrupt. So, and she said text messages are also very good. Of, let's say, there's you got to get something out there quick. They're about to vote, and you just want to get your message to them as quickly as possible. Text message, as we all know, gets read a lot faster than an email. So that was Marina's advice. Now, she also had some other information about, let's say you're not a constituent. let's say you're contacting a legislator who isn't representing you. Well, chances are they're probably not going to pay as much attention to you, right? But let's say they're working on a bill that is really important to you. You want to make sure that you get that across. Well, in that case, what you want to do is you want to emphasize your expertise or your familiarity or your connection to the issue. You know, maybe you're an educator. Maybe you're a physician or work in healthcare. Maybe you have a family member who has a certain condition or issue that is being affected by this legislation. Put that in the email. Make sure that they know that this is something that affects you. They'll be more likely to respond and read that. So, bring your personal story, your expertise into that communication. So that's something we'll talk about a little bit more at the end of the month in that community lobbying, but I wanted to bring that up just because here we have Senator Davis and his cell phone number, and you might wonder exactly what to do when you're confronted with this different ways to contact, especially electronically, your lawmakers. Okay, let me scoot along. So let's go back to the main website page. We kind of just click back to, you can click on the Utah State Legislature right here. In fact, but actually from Senator Davis's site, and I should mention this, actually, the first thing you have to do is you have to click on the Utah State Senate icon. That will bring you to the Senate page. And then in the middle of that page, there's a Utah Legislature button that you click on that will bring you back to the main page. Like I said, it can be a little confusing when you get sidelined into the House and Chamber websites. Where you want to be, though, is you want to be back on this main site where it says Utah State Legislature. You got the big picture of the dome up there. So now we're going to look at the weekly schedule. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what the weekly schedule was until I started doing the research for this, and Marina told me about it. But it's a pro tip from a lot of people who spent a lot of time working at the Hill to try to figure out what's going to be happening in the future. And here is why. One of the drawbacks of the legislature is that they only release the committee agendas 24 hours before the hearing actually takes place. That's the rule. Now, sometimes they release it a little bit earlier, and then, of course, it sometimes gets altered or adjusted or edited. But that 24-hour rule is pretty strong, which means that you don't have a whole lot of time to kind of figure out what your schedule is. And that's where the weekly schedules come in, because they are posted generally about a week ahead of time. Now, they won't tell you what is going to be heard in the committee, but they're going to tell you which committee is going to meet at which day and which time and in which room, so that you can really block out your schedule. Let's say you have a bill coming up about reproductive rights, or a bill you're interested in about occupational licensing, or maybe it's something about health care. Well, you pretty much know it's going to be in the Health and Human Services Committee, or it's going to be in the Judicial Committee, or something like that. So you can look ahead to make sure that you're going to the right spot. Let me see over here. Sorry. Sometimes my mouse disappears. Anybody see my mouse? There it is. Got to bring it over to this page. So what we want to do is we want to figure out where these weekly schedules are. So the way you do that is you go to the resources page, which is that far left white rectangle right here, indicated by the red square. You click on that. That will bring you to this general page. And in fact, what we think is going to happen is the legislature website is going to shift a little bit once the session starts. Right now, things are in a little bit of a hibernating mode. Some things aren't exactly where they're going to be once the lawmakers start showing up. But this is where they are now. I imagine they'll stay there, but some of these things might be actually brought up to the home page as well. So if we wanted to go find the weekly schedules, we got to dig for them a little bit right now. I think they're going to be more visible in a week or two. The next thing we do is we go to the 2018 general session link right here, which is actually kind of a big link page which has information about what's going on in the session. This is where it lives right now. And if you look at the very top, there's weekly schedules right here. And it's got a bunch of asterisks around it. So you know it's important, and you know people rely on this, although it's something that only people who really work on the Hill a lot tend to rely on, because they know that it's important to block your time out and know exactly when and where you might have a hearing. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll click on the weekly schedules link right there, ignore all the other things there. And this will bring us to a website that has week 1 and 2 schedules for the House and Senate.
Changed already.
Yeah, it's different.
Has it changed?
Yeah.
I just did this like 2 hours ago. That's funny.
I just like that on my phone.
So what is it not on that website anymore?
No, it's on the phone. It is on the phone version. It is.
Okay. Well, this is definitely going to be in a little bit of flux, because we're at a point where the legislature is sort of building the site, getting ready for the session. What's interesting is it says 2017 right here. That's a typo because the schedules they have posted are actually the 2018 schedules. So you can tell things are still a little bit fluid when they have a typo on their own site. The way we check that is, I looked at the schedules, and January 22nd is a Monday on the schedule, and it was a Sunday back in 2017. So the schedules are accurate even if the dates aren't. I'm sorry if in the past 2 hours they've moved it around. Obviously they're trying to make my job difficult. So let's go ahead and click on the House schedule for week 1, which brings us to a PDF actually, and these are PDFs that are going to be updated throughout the session. And it's a little bit old school. You know, it's not sort of a dynamic online calendar, but it's something that can be pretty useful as you're going through it. And let's take a look over on Thursday, January 25th, which would be like the 4th day of the session. You can see that there is a judiciary, law enforcement, criminal justice, natural resources, and transportation committees going on between 2 and 5 o'clock on Thursday. Now, you might not know what bills are going to be in those committees, but let's say you have a natural resources bill or you have a law enforcement bill that you know is going to be, you know, probably heard. Well, then what you can do is you can say, you know what, I'm not going to schedule anything between 2 and 5 o'clock on Thursday because there is a chance that this might come up. So this is what kind of the pros do to make sure that they're not running around as much. Question?
Sorry, I just want to be able to follow you, and I don't know where to do that. Can we pause to just see how to get to where you're at? on the
Absolutely.
video?
Let me.
There's a full month schedule that has what he's talking about on the
I
new
found that.
page right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So if you
I
go
found
to the,
I got in by clicking on more 2018.
Somebody actually gotten online here?
Are you having
So
trouble?
Jason,
I'm
where
doing
it
the exact same
says
thing as them on my
2018,
phone.
the line in reality says more 2018.
Does it now? Okay. So the way I got this is I went to the resources white box on the front homepage right there,
Right.
which brings up this page right here. And on the top left, you've got a 2018 general session link, which was here at least a couple hours ago when I put this together. And there's other information here too. A lot of it is redundant to what's on the front page, but this is a unique link that you find just on this resources page. You click on that, and then you get the 60-second legislature page and the asterisks highlighting the weekly schedules there, which are PDFs. They're not dynamic calendars, which we'll look at in a little bit. This is a little bit more of like a day planner aspect of your legislature. A little bit old school, but something that is helpful. So we click on that, we get 2018, even though it says 2017 schedules, and you have House and Senate schedules, and they blocked it out for the first 2 weeks. The new weeks will come up, and they'll even have some draft schedules, kind of preliminary schedules as the session goes on as well. So you click on week 1 for the House. You can see that, general session of the 62nd Legislature House schedule. And this is the first week. You actually have opening ceremonies right there, 10 o'clock. So you can sort of see this is a schedule that's unique for that first week. And this lets you block out time. So you might not know when your bill's coming up, but at least you'll know that, hey, if it does come up, it's going to come up at this time, in this room, in this hearing. And that can be very helpful. And that's why we wanted to bring this up for you. It's something that I'm going to plan on using this year myself, actually. So let's keep going.
So is the number next to the committee meeting or whatever, is that the room number?
That is the room number, yep. And we'll go into sort of how to find the maps and the room numbers and things like that in just a little bit. This is a bit of a shorthand way. And when it just says 450 or 445, that means within the big dome capitol itself. There's also a House and a Senate building. And they generally don't have committee hearings there, but sometimes they do, and those will have a different annotation to them as well, which we'll talk about in just a bit. So, okay. Let me see. Let's keep going. So, what we should actually do now is actually click the back button, go back. You're on this PDF right now. You got to kind of click the back button. There's no special magic way to get out of this, which will bring you back to the resources page. So keep going back, or press, of course, that magic get back to the home page button in the upper left-hand corner, the one with the dome, and that will bring you back to what we call the initial start page or the home page, where we'll begin a lot of our searches here. So now we're going to go out of those weekly schedules into what we would call more the dynamic calendars, the ones that have a lot of links you can click on, and actually where you'll probably spend the majority of your time trying to find out what's going on at the legislature, which frankly is what a lot of people do. trying to find out what's going on, when things are being heard, when's it coming up. And that's where the calendar becomes crucial. So let's go ahead and click on that middle white rectangle, the calendar rectangle, and jump into where these weekly schedules are occurring. So what should pop up is the current week, which of course there's not much going on at the legislature right now, except I'm probably building the website. That's probably what they're doing. So you can see here we are Tuesday the 9th. Really not a lot going on. There's one committee hearing going on Thursday, but certainly this is not what the calendar is going to look like once the session goes into full swing. So what I'd like to do is actually give you a taste of a little bit what a more full calendar looks. You won't be able to do this online. I just went and screenshotted a calendar from November of 2017. This is actually an interim session week, not the full-blown session. This is sort of a smaller version of it. And you can see there's a lot of hearings going on. There's a lot of links, a lot of revised agendas. You can see with each of the revised comments there. This is a little bit more of what a session calendar will look like, but still not quite as busy as it gets up at the legislature. So to see exactly how busy it gets, we're going to have to go back in time. We're going to have to go back to last year's session to look at what the calendars looked like then, because they haven't populated the calendars yet for this year. So we went back in time to look at that. So the way we're going to do that is we're on this calendar for January 2018. This week, very sleepy, not much going on. What you want to do is go to where the red arrows are, where it says January 2018, or the other one where it says View Month. Click on those, and what you'll do is you'll bring up a monthly calendar for January. So we'll do that for 2018. It switches over to something that looks like this. Again, still not a lot going on. They haven't populated it. The only thing they've got is the opening day for the legislature happening on the 22nd. So what we've got to do is we've got to go back in time. We've got to go back to, let's go back to February 2017. So what you do is you go to where the red chevrons are, the red triangles. It's a scroll down menu. Change January to February. Change 2018 to 2017, and all of a sudden, you're a year younger. How does that feel? Feels pretty good, doesn't it? All right, so we're all a year younger. It's February 2017. This was what was going on in the legislature about a year ago. And you can see things are pretty busy, but it's actually not as busy as it seems. There's only, let's look at February 6th, there's only one committee hearing listed, executive offices. But if you look down at the bottom, it says plus 19 more. So there are 19 more committee hearings happening that day, but they're just not visible on this calendar because they can't cram them all in. So what you need to do is you need to go and click on plus 19 more if you want to see everything that's happening that day. And if you look across that calendar, there's a lot going on. This one's, I think, got 16 more, 19 more, 16 more. There's a lot of hearings, and what you'll do a lot of your time on this website will be surfing through hearings, trying to find the one you're interested in on these calendars, looking at the agenda and kind of getting into it. But there's this initial, if you initially looked at this page, you're like, oh, there's not a lot going on. But if you click on that 19 more, this is what happens. The whole thing drops down, and you start to see all of the different hearings. And some of the days where it's really busy goes all the way down to the floor pretty much in terms of how many hearings that you'll be scrolling through. So this gives you a little bit more. What it actually does is it shows you the full hearing schedule for the rest of the week. So you not only have February 6th, but also the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. And you can start to see how busy and how complicated this legislative session is. All these hearings are going on at the same time. A lot of 8 o'clocks, a lot of 10 o'clocks. So you've got to choose where you want to go. You can't be in two places at once. So this is where the calendar and the scheduling becomes pretty important. So you'll be doing a lot of expanding of calendars and surfing of calendars as you go through. So let's take a look at one particular hearing. Social Services Appropriations Subcommittee meets at 8 o'clock on that February 6th, on that morning. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at what's going on with this committee hearing. So there we are. We're going to focus in on that one right here. And let's see. So is it working? There we go. So here we are. We're going to blow that up. We're going to look at what these icons are. Now remember, the weekly schedules were much more like a day planner. This is much more dynamic. You can really get into the nitty-gritty and get a lot of information out of this calendar. So there's 3 different icons underneath the Social Services Subcommittee. There's a clock, there's a document, and there's a play button. So because this happened in the past, the clock is actually representing the minutes of the meeting. So you click on that, you'll go in and you'll get a PDF of the minutes of actually what happened, what they voted on, little short summary of the discussion, and everything that happened within that hearing. If you click on the document, you'll get the latest, usually revised agenda for that hearing. And if you click on the play button, you might be able to listen to some audio or even watch a video of the hearing if it's one of the rooms where they actually have a video feed. So this is all in the past. This is retrospective. So obviously, if you're looking at a future hearing, you're not going to be able to read the minutes because it hasn't happened yet. So that's one way that there's a little bit of a difference. If we're looking in the past, you'll get the minutes, you'll get the agenda, and so forth. So this is a little bit of how you can dive into this information. I encourage you, if you're following along, to click on some of those links, if you can, and sort of take a look at some of the documents and materials that are available. Question?
Will there be other documents besides the agenda
Oh, yes.
that show up?
Yes, usually if you go to the play button, you will get maybe some other PDFs, some testimony, some official reports, things like that.
Slideshows.
Yeah, slideshows that might be added to the general meeting sort of agenda or discussion. It kind of depends on the subject, what the legislators bring, and who is doing some of the witness and expert testimony. But there usually are what we would call meeting materials, which are posted, and actually they are usually posted 24 hours in advance of the hearing as well. Some of them only get posted afterwards if they're actually created during the hearing or there's something that people bring to the hearing. But there is usually a trove of documents that ends up going. Not all hearings have them, but some of them do. So you would find that under the play button where we say watch or listen to the hearing or review what we call meeting materials. So each of those icons will bring you more in-depth information. And you know, sometimes you might miss a hearing. You got to be somewhere else or something goes on. You want to go back and find out what happens. This is a great way to get that information just in a heartbeat. Read the minutes real quick. Maybe zoom in on the audio of where the discussion happened. They'll actually tell you where each bill was discussed. You don't have to listen to all 2 hours, but you can just click on HB 177 and it'll bring you to that point in the audio where HB 177 came up for discussion. So that can be very helpful. Sometimes it's a little muffled and all that, but generally you can get a sense of what's going on at the hearings. So this is a retrospective one. Now let's take a look at sort of what about a prospective one, if you're trying to figure out whether or not you should go to this hearing. So we're going back to the February 2017 calendar here. Well, let's zoom ahead a year. So go up to those scroll menus and change February to January and change 2017 to 2018. And all of a sudden we're a year older and we're back in the present day. And we've only got one hearing to choose from, though, that's still in the future, this one happening on the 11th. So let's go over to that one. It's an Administrative Rules and Review Committee, which sounds really exciting. Let me just tell you, Administrative Rules, you know, that's got to be a real page-turner. So that's going to happen on Thursday. Now let's take a look at how the icons under this committee are a little bit different. So instead of minutes, we don't have a clock, right? We don't have minutes because the hearing hasn't happened yet. We've got a document, so you can review the agenda. That's the primary button right there. There's also a map pin, and that shows you where the meeting is going to take place. You click on that, it'll bring you to a page which shows you the room and sort of its location generally within the Capitol. This, I believe, is a new aspect of the website. You used to have to kind of go and look at some PDF maps and things like that to kind of make sure you knew where the room was, or you maybe print out a couple copies of maps. This one actually dynamically shows you where the room is, which can be very helpful because it can tell you whether or not it's a big hearing room or a small hearing room. If it's a small hearing room and you know it's going to be a crowded hearing, save yourself the effort, stay at home and just watch or listen online. That's what cyber lobbying is all about. And that way you don't have to fight the traffic, the parking, and trying to squeeze your body into a room where there's already 100 people there. So room numbers become pretty important. And then finally, the calendar icon. This is another new aspect of the website. You click on that, and depending on sort of how well adapted your phone or computer are, it will actually add something to a Google Calendar or an Apple Calendar, like an iCal, automatically for that hearing, location, time, with the time zone, everything like that. So I tried it, I clicked on it, and all of a sudden I was going to the Administrative Rules and Review Committee on Thursday, which I quickly cut because I don't want to go to that. But that's a new neat aspect. Just be careful because it happens really quick and all of a sudden it'll be on your calendar and you might want to not go to that one. So those are the icons for hearings that are in the future or to be, the kind of information that you can get from those. Okay, let's see. Yeah.
Are you going to cover in the rest of the meeting, some point in the future, how to work from home and how to provide input if you're not physically there? Or is,
You know, yeah, that's a really good question. So let's say you're watching
Because
or
I
listening
thought
to a
I read
committee
that was
hearing
possible.
in real time. I mean, that is where tweeting, Facebook, social media posting, or even texting a lawmaker in the middle, or emailing a lawmaker in the middle of the hearing can be helpful. That's probably about the only way to kind of make an instant impact when you're remote from the hearing. You can't really testify remotely, but you can make your voice or your presence heard on social media. And believe me, if you were to look at what the legislators are doing during these hearings, they're on Twitter, they're on Facebook, they're watching what's going on, or they're updating, their family dog photos or something like that. But they're gonna see some of that, especially if there's a big volume and it's well directed coming through at a specific time. But there's no way to testify remotely. You've got to be there physically in the seats, raising your hand. And sometimes you can't even do that. Sometimes they'll just be like, okay, how many people are in favor of the bill? Raise your hand. How many people are opposed? We'll take 2 speakers from each side, go. So you might not even get a chance if you're in a crowded or a busy hearing.
so you could text each member of the committee individually or together and get your input.
You could, yeah. That one, you could basically create in that case, you could
Mailing
create
list.
like a mass spam Twitter or a text list to do that. So,
For the committee.
cool. Okay. Other questions? So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to jump from calendars to the last white box on that main page. So if you're following along, click that return to home page icon. We're going to go back to the home page, and we're going to look at committees. And committees are really where the magic happens at the legislature. It's where bills live and die based on a handful of votes, or actually even sometimes which legislators are taking a bathroom break. I've seen that happen of where chairman will call a bill to vote just when he knows his opponents are out of the room and get it passed. So it's kind of an interesting experience to go to listen to a committee or be there in person. So click on the committee button. And let's go look at the committees. Now,
The
the
one that says
interesting...
resources?
Pardon?
The one that says resources?
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. It should say committees. Oh, yes, it is. Let's go to resources. Or
Okay.
you could click on the committees button at the top.
Okay.
I'm only reading half my notes, and I'm going on memory here, so I
Okay.
apologize if I'm skipping a bit. The rest of my notes I can't get because they've scrolled down too far. So you can either click on the committees pull-down menu at the top, or go to the resources button. I imagine the website might change a little bit in the next couple of days, and committees might, or something might come up on this homepage that is a little bit more easy to access. But choose which one to go to. I say let's click on the committees button, the one with the double red triangles up at the top, and that will bring us to this page. And this is actually a really big, comprehensive committee page. It has all the committees in the legislature on there. The thing about it is, at the legislature, during the session, we're really only concerned with what are called standing committees. These are the committees that meet just during the session, and that's where all the bills are heard and where the votes happen. And so what we want to do is we don't want to look at all these committees. We just want to isolate the standing committees. We don't care about the Health Reform Task Force. June, I know you do. But it doesn't meet during the legislative session. It only meets during the interim session. So we can clear out a bunch of the chaff here, oversight panels and commissions and things like that, by going to the scroll down menu right here where it says committees by type year and scrolling down and selecting just standing committees. And that will eliminate all the extra and focus on the ones that are the most important during the legislative session. Now remember, there's basically a mirrored version of all these committees as well. We have a House version and a Senate version as well. So one thing to think about as you're going through the committees is make sure you're looking at the right one. You don't want to go and show up at the Senate Public Lands Committee when your bill is being heard in the House Public Lands Committee. Even though they have almost the same name, they operate on parallel tracks during the session. And you want to make sure you're going to the right one. So if we just limit it to standing committees, you can see this trims down quite a bit. And because H comes before S, we're looking at the House committees first. If you were to scroll down on your page, you'd see the mirror image of all the Senate committees there as well. And committees matter by subject. So generally, if there's a law enforcement bill, it's going to show up in the Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee, either the House or the Senate side. If it's a bill about teachers, it's probably going to show up in the Education Committee. If it's a health care bill, probably Health and Human Services. Now, sometimes that changes. Some of you might remember some of the Medicaid expansion bills. They went through Business and Labor. in the past years. And the reason they did that is the representative who sponsored them was the chairman of the Business and Labor Committee. So he wanted those bills to go through his committee. So generally they follow a well-orchestrated path with occasional deviations based on personal privilege of the legislators or chairs of the different committees. So let's take a look at the House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee. At the ACLU, we do a lot of work on those subjects. That's a committee where we spend a lot of time. So let's click on House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice. We click on that. We come to this page, which is the 2018 page for that committee. Again, things are sparse. There's nothing scheduled yet for 2018. Now, in a couple of weeks, this is going to be starting to populate with hearings and agendas and things like that, but there's still a lot we can do on this page. For instance, you can look at the members of the committee. If you click on the members button right there, you can see who is on this committee. And this would just be House members, because this is the House committee here. You can look at bills assigned, overview. You can even subscribe to any updates for this particular committee if you go over to the subscribe button on the far right. So there's a lot you can do even though you're not actually looking at any committee hearings. But to make sure that we can actually understand what's going on with this committee, let's jump back in time to 2017. We like to go back in time a lot today. So this is actually the hearings for 2017 for the House Law Enforcement and Criminal Justice Committee. This is what the website will look like for 2018 within a couple of weeks' time. So you can see hearings every couple days, the location of the hearing, agendas, notices, minutes, because of course these are all in the past. And this is where you get like a full committee list. It's not a calendar list, it's a committee list. So it's another way to look at things. And of course they would have committee hearings before they happen listed on this page as well, although they might only be 24 hours in advance, which is where that weekly schedule comes in handy because you can plot things out a little bit more. So bills assigned is important. You kind of know, you can double check to see if your bill's assigned to a particular committee. Members, as I mentioned. So this is the committee page for that you will find on all the different committees, and it will be populated with a lot of information. You generally don't spend a lot of time on this page, though, because you're generally hunting bills. You're not hunting committees. So this is maybe something you won't do a lot, but it's good to know that it's here in case maybe you heard a bill that was heard in a committee and you don't know what date it was. Well, here you can go and you can look and you just start surfing through the agendas, look for your bill and locate it and get the testimony and get the details about that. But most people look for bills. So let's move on to that aspect of the website as well. So hit the green arrow up here. Let's go back to the home page. Return back to the main page by going on the Utah State Legislature button. And here we are back to the main page, and we're going to look at a specific bill. And this is what we spend a lot of time doing when we're on our computers and with the website. So there's two ways to do it. One is you can click on the bill menu at the very top. And that's generally what you would do if you didn't know the number of the bill and you needed to search by lawmaker or search by subject. But if you happen to know the number of the bill, in this case looking up HB 12, you can type it into the main search bar right there in the center of the screen, and what will pop up is that exact description. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that bill numbers repeat year to year. So HB 12 in 2018 might be Ray Ward's bill about family planning service amendments, but last year it might have been a gun control bill. And so make sure you get the right year when you're looking for the numbers, and occasionally you'll mistype a number and you'll get a 2017 bill and you're like, wait, that doesn't look right, what's going on? So be aware that they recycle the numbers, especially when they have about 1,000 bills a year. They've got to recycle those numbers. So we're going to take a closer look at the bill for HB 12, but let's also take a step back. Let's say we don't know that Ray Ward's bill, Representative Ward from Bountiful, is HB 12. Let's just say we know that he's the one who sponsored it, and we need to kind of do a little bit more digging. In that case, let's go up to the bills top menu right there, and we're going to go to the search for bills page. And you can get my little Star Wars joke right there. So in this case, there's a lot of different ways to search for bills. You can do it by lawmaker, you can do it by subject matter, you can do it in a bunch of different ways, and obviously we're only looking at the 2018 general session here. Most of the time you'll do it by lawmaker, and that's actually easier because in subject you get 30, 50, 100 bills in some of these very popular subjects. Lawmakers generally have between 5 and 12 bills each. Some of them have 30 or 40, but that's pretty rare. There's only about a dozen legislators who do that many. So it's easier to search by lawmaker. Maybe you don't know the lawmaker exactly. That's where you go to kind of look through the rosters and find the person, like we did earlier on. In this case, we know it's Representative Ward, so we go to Representative, and we use that pull-down menu, and we select Ray Ward, or R Ward right there. And we immediately, if we do that, we go to his page, and he's only got 4 bills where we can see the text, and a couple of short titles or bills that are in development. So there's HB 12 right there. That's another way that we found HB 12. In this case, we're pretending that we didn't know it was House Bill 12, and we had to go through the lawmaker to find it. So you'll do that sleuthing a little bit here as well. The numbers start to run together in your head. Is that HB 15 or HB 51? You know, you're going to get a little confused when you're tracking this stuff. So usually we're better at peoples and faces, and so that's why tracking which lawmaker is sponsoring the bill can be an easier way to keep it handy. So let's take a closer look at HB 12. This is actually a bill that the ACLU is pretty interested in this year. It's a Medicaid expansion bill for family planning services. So if you clicked on HB 12 there's Representative Ward, Dr. Ward, smiling. And here is the bill page, which includes the text of the bill on HTML format. You've also got a lot of different options on the right-hand side of the screen. You can actually download a PDF of the bill. You can track the bill, which means that you'll get updates as it moves through the legislative process. You can get, email. Actually, track the bill means that you'll put it in a special list. Where you go into that list, you'll be able to see all the bills you're tracking, kind of like your shorthand list of like, okay, these are the bills I'm concerned about. Email notification is where you'll get email updates about when the bill is being heard in committee, what the votes were, things like that. The one thing I've warned is that if you click on a lot of bills or a lot of committees to get these updates, your inbox will start to look like a volcano, overflowing with lots of things. So just be judicious in how you do that, especially if you like to keep a nice and tidy inbox. But let's say you're really passionate about this bill, you want to see what's going on, click on that email notification, you'll get updates whenever there's movement or things happening on it. If you scroll down on the page, you'll be able to read the bill text. Now, reading bill text can kind of like be reading a foreign language, especially a foreign language that makes your head hurt. So those of us who aren't lawyers might find that a little bit challenging, which is why they have the highlighted provisions at the top of the page. So let's take a look at that. That is really plain language approach to what's going on in the bill. Now, sometimes it isn't that plain, or sometimes the bill is complex enough that even plain language is complex, but this is a good way to get a sense of what's going on without trying to read through different code definitions and things like that that are further down. Occasionally you'll need to do that, especially if it's a complex bill, you're interested in a particular aspect of it. Something that comes to mind was a telehealth bill from a year or two ago that included an abortion provision in it that was way down in the middle of it. So sometimes you do have to go down and kind of read in the nitty-gritty. But the highlighted provisions is usually a good way to get a sense of what's happening. And what also happens is that you'll see some different changes within it. Now, in this case, let me think if I didn't put that in there, but you'll see strike-through text, where there's a line through it. That means the bill is going to eliminate this text from the code. Red text means that, underlined text means that it's added to the code. So there's a couple of little shorthand things, and occasionally you also get substitutes. Well, let's say Ray Ward's bill, he needs to negotiate some sort of difference to get it through the committee. So you'll see HB 12 S1 or S2 or S3. Those are substitutes, and you really want to make sure you're looking at the latest substitute for the bills. Occasionally they'll go to like substitute 16, like they did for the school grading bill a couple years ago. Occasionally they'll go back to previous substitutes as well. They'll go to 16 and then they'll eventually pass substitute 8. So it can be a little bit confusing when that happens. There is a way that you can look using the bill website right here to actually compare the changes between the original and the substitutes as well. It will zero in on exactly what has changed between them. Now that hasn't happened yet here on this bill because there are no substitutes. But this is about as deep and granular as you get with the legislature in terms of looking at a bill. And again, the highlighted provisions is a good way to make sure you understand the gist of what this legislator is trying to do. Another good thing to do, though, is, of course, email or contact the legislator and say, hey, what are you trying to do with this bill? And then they can write back or explain, or you can have a phone conversation with them and get a little bit more detail about it as well. Okay, so now let's look at bill status. So we're going to jump back to the main page for the bill, and instead of looking at the bill text, we're going to press the middle button there for bill status. This is something you'll spend a lot of time on as well. Finding out where the bill is and where it's going next is very important to planning your time and your schedule on the Hill. So in this case, the session hasn't started, so there are no hearings scheduled, there are no chamber votes or floor votes, but we do know a little bit about it. It was sent to the LFA, which is the Legislative Fiscal Analyst, and there is a fiscal note for this bill, which is another PDF that says how much this bill is going to cost. And that usually becomes an important consideration when these bills are being debated. If we go back to the page, you can actually see right down here, it says fiscal note with a little PDF symbol by it. Not all bills have fiscal notes, and not all bills have fiscal notes even when they're voted on. Sometimes it takes a while to develop them, but it's another ingredient to the puzzle about whether the bill is going to pass, how much it's going to cost. And for instance, for Ray Ward's bill, it's going to be a big issue in terms of how much the state is going to pay for this expanded Medicaid benefit. So something important in the debate and the discussion as the bill goes forward. So in this case, we know that the fiscal note is publicly available. You see that. You can go back to the main page, download that fiscal note. As this continues, you'll start to see, House actions, Senate actions. They'll give you the vote count. You can go in and actually jump back to the hearing where it happened. There's a lot of information on this status page. You'll spend a lot of time on that, especially if you're trying to figure out when this bill is going to move next. Sometimes it'll pass committee, and then you'll wait 2 or 3 weeks for it to come up for a floor vote. Or it'll pass the House, and then you're going to wonder when it's going to come up in the Senate. When is it going to move over to those reading calendars? You'll get a good glimpse of it on this status calendar because you'll start to see some movement happening. It's kind of like watching a race online. Which bill is going to move faster, or which bill is going to advance to the next stage. So bill status is pretty important. And then, of course, hearings and debate, you can go and actually, it's another way to access some of the record from hearings that have happened, or even from floor debates. You can actually watch the floor debates live, or sometimes you can watch them recorded as well. Those are pretty exciting. That's when the sponsor of the bill is really out there in the den of lions defending their bill, trying to get it passed. It's probably the most exciting aspect of the legislature. So, any questions about bills? You'll spend more time on this page, I think, than you will on the committee hearing pages specifically. Yes?
Is there a good resource for understanding some of the verbiage in the bills? There's some of them that are really self-explanatory and right away you get it, and then some of them it's like, I have no idea what they're saying. Is there somewhere someone you can call, somewhere you can look this stuff
Short
up?
of law school.
Yeah, but if you're not
I
a
know.
lawyer, not
If you have friends
everybody's
who
a
are
lawyer.
lawyers, maybe this is the one time you'll actually lean on them, maybe.
They don't do that stuff for free.
No, they don't. That is a really good question. You can really tie yourself in knots trying to figure out what a bill is actually going to do. And sometimes they're deliberately confusing. They're trying to obfuscate what's going on. So I think calling up the lawmaker, trying to get a straight shot in terms of what's going on, or let's say it's a bill on a particular subject, calling up an advocacy group or a nonprofit that is working on or tracking that bill. Even doing a Facebook message, on that group's website or on another, kind of forum where they might have some people on, just saying, hey, can anybody give me the gist of what this bill's going to do? That's probably the fastest and best way to get an answer, to be honest. Okay. Especially if you read it and you hit a brick wall, that's what I would go to next to find out. Because you're right, there can be some very surprising or unanticipated aspects of bill language that even the lawmakers might not even understand. They write the thing, but sometimes they mean to do X and it does Z. So
Which is one of the reasons we have 1,000 bills, because they don't pay enough attention when they're doing them the first time, and half the bills are corrections.
Well, it's job security, right? For them.
Yeah, right.
They got to clean it up every year. So that's bill status. Let's move on to the final aspect of what we'll look at, and that is reading calendars. So let's click back to the main page. By going back to the Utah State Legislature, where the dome page, I guess we could call it. They might change the photo though, so I'm a little reluctant to call it that page. Going to the Resources tab again, we're going to access the reading calendars. We got to dig a little bit again. I think these things are going to become more visible, but right now we're going to have to dig. Now, reading calendars are the schedules for the actual floor debates and floor chambers. We have committee hearings, which are usually a group of maybe 8 to 12 legislators debating a bill, and we all know the bill has to go through a hearing and then it can get to the main chamber of the House or the Senate. The reading calendar is the schedule for those main chambers for the House and the Senate, and it's a little bit like an auction. It happens really quick. Things move things move rapidly on the reading calendars within the Senate. So the reading calendars give you this heads up of when your bill is going to come up. So let's go to the red arrow. We're going to go to resources, and then we're going to go back to the 2018 general session page again. This is kind of a convoluted way to get there. I think they'll change it, but this is how we have to get there right now. So we click on general session. We go further down. We're not looking at weekly schedules. We're going down to reading calendar options. And you'll see they have actually, it's strange, they got PC or Mac or mobile devices. So
That's different where it says floor/reading calendars.
Floor reading calendars, yes, I see.
does it say now floor/reading
Yes,
calendars?
it
It
does.
changed.
It's got
And
a
that's
tab.
interesting because I have a note here that occasionally these are called floor calendars because it's the floor debate. That is what they're describing. Floor time is when the legislators, usually in the afternoon or evening, will not be in committee hearings and they'll be back in the chambers, and you can watch from the galleries or watch online. And that's when the bills come up in rapid session to be voted on up or down. Now, so does it actually say floor in reading calendars now?
Yes, it says floor/reading.
There's someone at the legislature just trolling me right now by changing these websites as I'm running through it. I literally screenshot this about 2.5 hours ago. Okay.
Sorry.
So, no, I appreciate that, Peter. So click on that, floor/reading calendar options, PC or Mac or mobile device, whichever you prefer, and you'll come to a website that I hope looks like this. You'll see there's a House side and a Senate side because we have two chambers, of course. And the calendars, there's a bunch of different types of reading calendars, actually, or floor calendars. You've got time certain, which is when they kind of know exactly when the bill is going to come up. And it's going to come up at 3:40. Gosh darn, that bill is going to come up at 3:40. Like they're working on a clock. That really is helpful if you have a time certain bill, that you know that that's when it's going to be debated. You can tune in and watch, or be there, or send your tweets out 10 minutes beforehand, or your text messages to make sure you get your message in there. You've got the third reading calendar, and that's important because the legislature is a deliberative body. They actually vote on things twice before they vote on it for real. You've got a first reading and a second reading and then a third reading. So the third reading is when it counts. So they'll actually have what we call a proxy vote, or kind of a mock vote on the bill, and you actually see people change their minds between first and second and third. Third is when it really counts, and so that's why it's listed here as its own calendar, because the bill goes thumbs up or thumbs down at that point. And then Senate bills, this is of course is the House calendar. That's when the House is hearing Senate bills. So they actually have a special calendar where they have that crossover back and forth. And that doesn't happen for usually a little while in the legislature when you start to get that happening because they got to work on their own bills first. But those are the three main reading calendars. You can see over here in the Senate, you can see the second reading calendar has its own calendar as well. Time certain. Consent, those are bills that generally are going to pass that aren't too controversial. So there's a little bit of difference between them. But what's important about the reading calendar is that it gives you a bit of a heads up about when your bill is going to be heard. So let's go and actually click on the third reading calendar. And actually, if you click on it, I think it'll show nothing. So what I did is I went back to 2017 and I looked at an example of a third reading calendar from there. And here you can see this is from the House from January 25th. And you can see a bunch of bills that are about to be voted on, and they're voted on in sequence. They'll vote on 1 before 2, 2 before 3, that kind of sequence. But you also notice that these bills are circled. And a circled bill means it's in a holding pattern. And that can mean that the bill isn't going to be voted on because the lawmaker needs to do more lobbying, doesn't have the votes, and so they'll say, I want to circle my bill. There has to be a vote, and then they can circle it. So then they go around and make sure they get the votes for it. Could be the lawmaker is at a committee hearing or isn't going to be there or is out of the room or something like that. So bills are often circled. In this case, it's a little rare. Every single thing on this list is circled. Usually it's much more of a mix. But what will happen is you have a bit of checkers. You'll be skipping over bills that are circled. So if your bill is number 16 to be heard, but there are 10 bills circled above it, it's going to be heard a lot faster than going through all 16 bills. So the circled bills are something to watch because they jump over those bills generally and then they'll come back to them. And of course they can change the order of bills occasionally as well. So the reading calendars become important, especially at the end of the legislature when things are moving much faster, when they're trying to get all these bills passed. Things become a little more heated, intense, and pressurized. The reading calendars are important. So you can access that from home. You can get a heads up about what's going to happen and really predict when a bill is going to come up for vote. Now by this time, there's not a whole lot of lobbying that can be done. Usually that happens more in the committee hearing process. But occasionally a bill will hang by a vote or two. And so, targeting the right person or, making sure you're keeping up that consistent effort is very important. Plus, bills can be amended on the floor as well and changed. So you've got to be conscious that there could be some shenanigans and things that happen at the very end before the bill passes. Bills can even be raised from the dead, as we found out in previous sessions. So where it gets voted down in a committee, they can actually bring it back up on the floor, kind of the Lazarus bill approach to it. Doesn't happen that often, though. So that, I think, is the end of this particular type of presentation. I do have a couple more things I would go into, but I wanted to make sure that there are any questions that I could answer about committees, bills, calendars, sort of the major aspects of the legislature that we covered. Anything to go into more detail?
Tracking?
Yes. Yeah.
So I've heard from other people that they'll put a high fiscal note on a bill to make it not go through. Do you guys find that that's true, or?
That does happen. Yeah, the legislative fiscal analyst, sometimes the LFA office is what it's called. Sometimes they can actually do a pretty good job based on previous bills or understanding of putting a dollar amount on how much this bill is going to cost. Sometimes they're just picking a number. And I used to work in healthcare, and it was pretty hard sometimes to get a bill through when it has a $60 million fiscal note when we knew it really should have been 15 or something like that. So a Medicaid expansion and some of those bills are par for the course on that. So you're right, it is a stumbling block. Occasionally what the lawmaker will do is actually work with the legislative fiscal analyst, make some changes to try to bring down that fiscal note, almost like trying to kind of get in under a certain wire, whether it's an arbitrary number or something that they know just won't attract a whole lot of attention. Another thing that legislators will do is they won't actually go through a bill process, they'll actually go to an appropriations committee. And they'll bypass actually, HB 15 or whatever, and they'll just go to the appropriations committee and say, I need this amount of money to get this done. And that's another route that sometimes they take, especially if they know getting it through a particular standing committee is going to be difficult. So that is another tactic. Usually it's the legislators have a good bead on whether or not their fiscal note is going to be a problem or whether or not it's going to be okay. And usually that's where lobbyists come in. Community lobbyists come in because they can help tip the balance if that fiscal note is a couple $1 million too high and make a difference on that. There was a question here.
Well, I was going to ask sort of what you were talking about there is how, if they do come out with an unrealistic fiscal value, what can be done to change it?
So,
And
yeah.
there's like one bill I know that, or one, I don't know if that's a bill per se, but say the Bear River diversion with like a cost of a couple $2 billion. How would that get changed if they put in unrealistic numbers? And they very probably have put in.
And it can be unrealistically low or unrealistically high, right? That can happen both ways.
This is probably unrealistically low.
Low, okay. That's really where the community lobbying and teaming up with organizations, environmental groups, or healthcare groups can make a difference, because that's when you get the data or the information from a group that has studied this issue and has white papers, has studies, has numbers that you can use to counter a fiscal note. And occasionally that can be effective. I mean, because if you can prove that fiscal note is unreasonable and back it up with some information that maybe the legislative fiscal analyst didn't have access to, that can help a little bit. Now, there's a lot of other issues that go on with that, but including what the actual issue is about. But that teamwork of outside data and community pressure can actually be pretty powerful, and we've seen that work in healthcare.
Can a citizen lobbyist actually contact the fiscal analysts, or do you have to go through a contact? A representative who's.
You can go through a representative. They generally have better contact with that. The fiscal analysts try to stay a little bit insulated from the rough and tumble of politics, at least on paper. That's the way it's supposed to be. But I will say that advocacy groups, definitely have sit-down meetings with fiscal analysts. We did that with healthcare. Of like, hey, look, this is the evidence we have of why this should cost what it does. Let's see if we can figure out a better number. Or lawmakers do that as well. So I think the teamwork helps. I think if 25 individuals call up the fiscal analyst, each offering their own number and their own idea, that tends to get a little overwhelmed because these fiscal analysts are very burdened during the session trying to churn these things out. But if it can be a concerted effort where everyone works together and has especially a single number, that can be very helpful. With Medicaid expansion, we found out that when you had a divergent array of numbers, that can be confusing and challenging. If everyone agrees on one, that really helps as well. So teamwork with advocacy groups and lawmakers, I think, can make the difference there. Whether it's unrealistically low or high, especially if it's. Sometimes you want a fiscal note to be unreasonable, though, right? I mean, right? You want to actually try to juice it the other way. So it can be. It's one of the puzzle pieces for getting a bill through or not. And I would say that for healthcare and other issues, it's extremely important. For other issues, it doesn't come up as much. And in fact, sometimes it skates under the radar and no one even sees it. So, yes?
I'm a little bit confused. Like, so the legislator determines the fiscal note, and if he does or she does, what would be the point of making it off, making it so high that it won't pass? I mean,
the legislator doesn't. They have to submit it to the Legislative Fiscal Analyst Office, or the Office of the LFA, and they do an independent, kind of like an audit on the bill, using whatever information they can find. And sometimes there's a lot, sometimes they're just picking a number out of thin air. But they come up with the number, and the legislator has a little bit of back and forth, but not a whole lot. Sometimes what the legislator will do is actually go and change the bill to try to bring down that fiscal note. Like, okay, we're not going to cover 10,000 people, we're going to cover 5,000 people. Or we're going to turn it into a pilot program with a sunset. Those are some easy tricks about how to actually bring down those fiscal notes.
That's what they did with the...
You said at one point they sometimes set it purposely too high, and I'm thinking, why would they set it purposely too high to do?
If they don't want it to
They-
pass.
don't want it
well,
to pass. Then why do they even bring it up to begin with?
The legislative fiscal analyst sometimes will set a number high with backing. They have their reason to do it, but it would be higher than the legislator would want, and so that's where the negotiation happens. It's supposed to be independent, but we all know that there's things that happen. I think they do a really good job under a lot of pressure. And with 1,000 bills coming through, they've got to churn these things out very quickly. So I give them a lot of credit for what they do. Other questions? Because the next thing I wanted to step in is we actually surveyed some veterans on the Hill to find out what their expert tips and advice would be to community lobbyists. So I wanted to go into that a little bit. So we talked to folks. Riley Curtis, you guys might know her. She's my old colleague at UHPP. She recommends the app or website TweetDeck. It's something where you can actually follow the news of the legislature very easily. Now, let's say you're not on Twitter. That's okay. Twitter can be kind of a weird aspect of the legislature. You don't have to actually actively tweet to use TweetDeck. TweetDeck actually is a kind of it's a viewer. It shows you what's flowing through the legislature. And since so much of the legislature happens on Twitter, with legislators tweeting out news and updates, it can be a really neat window and a very up-to-date window about what's happening. So Riley uses it to keep up-to-date with breaking news from news outlets or favorite reporters, organizations, as well as these two hashtags, Utah Poll and Utah Ledge. Hashtags are these sort of shorthand ways that you can track information. So if someone has a bill that they're talking about, they'll usually put Utah Ledge, hashtag Utah Ledge at the end. Okay. And if you follow those, then you actually kind of get, it's kind of like the Matrix. Imagine all these kind of like numbers streaming down in front of you, all this information coming through. But you can isolate it and say, you know what, I'm only interested in education bills, so I'm going to track a couple of lawmakers or a couple of lobbyists, from the UEA or groups like that, and I'm just going to focus on what they do. So Riley depends on TweetDeck. I agree with her on that a lot. It's a great way to kind of quickly see what's happening, what's hot, what's not, what's going on. Talked to Janice Foray. A lot of you guys know her. She's a longtime advocate up there, and so she uses the calendar to know what is scheduled. She subscribes to committee hearings and uses those email updates quite a bit. So she also says that they use the website to introduce the lawmakers to community activists. You know, go in there and start surfing around on the Senate roster or the House roster, get to know people a little bit, at least in that sort of two-dimensional Facebooky way in their profiles. And then you can also find out what their social media handles are, their Facebook pages, their Twitter handles. It's a way you can kind of get a little bit into the mind or into the psyche of what the lawmakers are doing. And then Amelia Kamai Wood at the United Way, you know, they generate a lot of information, especially around education bills and things that they're doing there. So she definitely leans on the Find Your Legislature link. That's something that they do to help introduce people to the lawmakers. They have a lot of first-time lobbyists. And then she also checks out the committee section in order to get a link to materials, as you brought up earlier, you know, any of the documents and PDFs, the audio, visual. There's a lot on there. It's not just a committee agenda. There's usually a lot of what we call metadata or additional information that's available there. You can really, if you're not at the hearing, you can almost feel like you're there online by using the resources on the website. So we also talked to Anna Brower-Thomas, who had this job before I came here. She's now at Voices for Utah Children. She loves the reading calendars. Anna's kind of odd. She loves reading calendars. But she says once you learn what they actually mean, it really helps you keep track of when a bill might be heard. And as she says, when you can sneak away for a lunch or to take a nap, because you know your bill isn't going to be heard because it's either circled or it's like number 65 on the reading calendar list. So you know it's not going to be heard that day, and it's going to come up the next day. So the reading calendar gives you a really good idea about planning your schedule. And time management is probably the unsung virtue of the best lobbyists there. They understand how to allocate their time to, you know, fill in as much of the day as they can doing the actual work and not kind of chasing loose ends around the Capitol. Ben Winslow, a very tweetable reporter from Fox News, probably the most tweeted person out there, someone who follows the legislature a lot. He had a lot of advice. You know, sometimes you just want to buttonhole a legislator, you know, and especially if you're a reporter, that's where you get your news. And so what he does is he checks out the Hall of Governors. You know, he wants to know where people are. He checks out the Capitol Preservation Board public calendar. And it's at the Utah State Capitol, /calendar. And that's where you know what lunches and events and what time they're going on in the Hall of Governors or in the Rotunda. That's where a lot of legislators get their free lunch. So if you know that there's a lunch at 11:30 on Tuesday, and it's got roast beef, and you know your lawmaker loves roast beef, you just stake that place out, and your chances are you're going to be able to buttonhole people there. So that's how Ben, sharing a nice little trick here, that's how he gets his scoops and his stories. The other thing you can do is you can pull people out of the floor and everything like that. You can send in green notes, but this seems a lot more fun to kind of, you know, stalk people. So that's what Ben does using the calendar. And then he also has a really good tip from Connor Boyack at Libertas Institute. He's developed a Chrome extension. Chrome is, of course, the Google Chrome web browser that allows you to understand how bills change as they're adapted and updated and substituted. So it's called Utah Law Formatting. If you use Chrome, which I happen to do, you can go and download this extension or browser extension. There's also a bit.ly link there. And that is something that it just automatically shows you this information when you plug in the bill title. Pretty sophisticated piece. Ben just discovered it. He says he loves it. It's really helpful for him. It helps decipher a little bit if you have a 50-page bill and you have substitute 1 and substitute 2 and you're like, how did it change? I don't want to read all 52 pages. This extension will show you exactly what the paragraphs or sentences that were changed there a lot faster. So that's what Ben recommends. And then lastly, Chase Thomas from Alliance for Better Utah. He uses the calendar function quite a bit. Especially he says to track what's coming up over the week or the next day, because once you're in a meeting, you can easily click through to see the documents they are using rather than trying to race up to get a paper copy. If you're someone who doesn't like paper, then these PDF documents and so forth can be very helpful. You can create a folder for each bill and just start filling it with all those PDFs that you glean from the website. And all of those are available on the calendars under the bill page or even on the hearing page themselves. And he also says the civic education subpage on the website, which we didn't go to, but you can find that in some of the pull-down menus. You know, how a bill becomes a law, what the different committee hearings are like, what is the leadership of the legislature, what is the rules committee and what do they do, a little bit more of the 2.0 stuff on legislative work. You can find that all out on the civic education side. Not necessarily tracking bills, but really understanding how that sausage is made in the back rooms. And the one thing I wish the legislature website had would be all the secret passages up there. There are a lot of secret passages and back doors, and all of a sudden a lawmaker will pop out somewhere, you're like, where'd they come from? And it's because there's a maze of secret hallways that go through the walls there. And you'll start to see that as you're up there a little bit. But they don't give those maps out, unfortunately. One last thing I want to mention is that this is just part one of the ACLU of Utah's lobbyist training. We'll have a community lobby training, and I believe Marina Lowe will be back doing that. She did it last year. This is actually what it looked like at the Salt Lake City main library in the main auditorium there. It will be January 31st, 6 to 9 p.m., usually a packed house. And she's got a lot of decades worth of experience. And we're doing this along with Equality Utah and Planned Parenthood as well. So some pretty powerhouse organizations sharing their knowledge to help get you up to speed for this upcoming session. That's pretty important. So that is the end of the training that we've got so far. I'd be glad to answer any more questions. Yeah.
Are you going to broadcast the event on the 31st?
That will, with Wi-Fi permitting, as we found out today, yes, we will Facebook Live that and broadcast that.
And you
as well.
said that's at the library?
The main library, I think it's the Testament Auditorium, that main auditorium as you come in off the plaza. Yeah.
Is this presentation, will it be located on either the ACLU site or sent out to the
This one right
attendees?
now?
Yeah.
It will be housed on our Facebook page, and we will share it on our website.
It will actually explode in 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
right.
Yes, it will be on our page. Sorry about that, Rita. We'll put PDFs out. We'll put it up front on the ACLU of Utah homepage and on Facebook. We'll make sure it gets out there. It's something that I think we'll go back and even update a little bit throughout the session as the pages change as well.